This is a story about a piece of shit receiving their deserved karma several years later. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence, and there are those that are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to extract my revenge. I had only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in, getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which being a shy person who hates conflict wasn't the best, but at least one of my customers was an absolutely adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I had last seen her, but one morning, I see her car park into the disabled parking bay, as she already has a blue badge. Only this time, she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have a chance to talk to her yet when a works truck, which did not have a blue disabled badge, pulled into the disabled space next to her, and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have absolutely massive balls of steel, and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled, and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next, I can't forget. This builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability, and claim the cast on her leg was a fake and that she probably milks the benefit system for as much money as possible. Then walks off putting on an overdramatic fake limp, laughing away with their teenage kid, whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years, I worked in this store, always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays, and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later, I was still working in this store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute cunt. Yet this year I was blessed with good fortune, and our store was outfitted with some absolute joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations. But instead of having external parties coming in and ticketing cars, the staff of the store were given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally, and there would be no paper tickets upon the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge, and so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules, there is a lovely £80 fine in return each time it happened. The first rule, no parking in disabled without a badge. And I know well that the scum builder is certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with a ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay, with no badge. I smashed them car details in with some well-shot photos, and sent the report off so that they would receive a lovely letter of their fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough though, but fortunately it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations. Because as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled, and as I worked at the front of the store, I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, the scum unfortunately learned their lesson, as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum, and they would find their new parking space inside child parking. Rule 2. Don't park inside child parking without a child. Had the scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course. Not, they haven't learned their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking, which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking and take the photos needed for them, including shots of their cat seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on a few weeks more of tickets being created, and eventually they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I am completely invisible to others and often looked over, and I have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer there in child parking or disabled. Has the scum finally learned their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3. You must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise, the scum still manages to fuck this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine. Trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big-ass car in it? Boom, that ain't inside a marked bay and catching another ticket and fine for the have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay. Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, Scumbag did. And there goes a few more weeks of fun, until eventually Scumbag runs out of ways that they can possibly break the rules, and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars, so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now, I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah blah blah, but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect, as they repeatedly changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they're still going to spend a fuck ton of the time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separate and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines building up over time for being scum. Cherry on the top, about 3 years later, I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket, accusing them for being the one giving them all parking fines. Which put me at peace, knowing this must have seriously got to them and cost them to still be raving mad after 3 years. Short version, I give someone many small parking fines adding up to the thousands of pounds for insulting a disabled lady several years earlier.